I left Santa Marta after being there for about 7 months. Taganga is actually the area I was in, and I had told myself, or told everybody, I thought it could be done in 6 or 8 days because I've got the current and the wind going with me. So I shot straight out, and the first 80 miles kicked my butt. 4 to 6 foot seas, 25 knots of wind. The waves were grouped close together. The boat was going back and forth, and I snapped off my dagger boards. Was unaware of this, but just continued to go. I busted out a window in my starboard side, lost all my ability to create solar, and batteries went down. Didn't know this right away until actually the alarms were going off for low batteries. So we overcame that, and basically had a very reasonable sail. It wasn't perfect by any means, but we went up through this area here and pulled into the Caymans right at, almost to the minute, 7 days. I spent 2 nights in the Caymans, got up the next morning, went about 85 miles, and the autopilot failed. Made a decision to continue, and as best of my calculations, I was running about a 15% or 85% efficiency rate. In other words, if my GPS showed that I'd sailed 100 miles, but because I wasn't sailing straight and correct, I only actually knocked off 85 miles. So I had a 15% efficiency rate, or deficiency rate, 85% efficiency rate. And so then I also was losing about 6 hours a night where I could not dysfunction anymore. I was just beat. So at that point I would drift and just try to get some decent sleep as best I could. So I was only when I was running 85% efficiency, and then for the day 24-hour period I was only running about 75% efficiency for the day. So essentially what should have taken a week took 11 days, because I just couldn't stay at it. I didn't have anybody to give me a break, or I didn't have the autopilot to run and keep it going. I come around here, there was a storm front that was supposed to move through, and when I come through here I hesitated a night or two, or actually a night, because the front did not look like it was all the way through, and I didn't want to go through this strait here and deal with all the currents and the waves that it's normally in there, plus bad weather. So I just waited, and the next morning things were considerably flat, more or less. Then I had issues where there just was no wind, and or the wind that I was getting was directly from the northeast. So I spent quite a bit of time hanging out in the areas between the Dry Tortugas and Cuba, and I was trying to stay out of the shipping channels. As I come closer to the Dry Tortugas, I run into some whale sharks in this area, caught some fish, and between here and Sarasota, I caught quite a bit of fish. I didn't want to catch any more. Got 50 miles off the coast of Florida, off of Sarasota area, and 12 o'clock at night. Thought I'd catch some sleep, and at 4:30 a front blew in, and ended up being out there an extra 2 days fighting that. During the fight of that weather and that front, I ripped off the front sail, and my mainsail was inoperable at that time because I had torn out the bottom 2/3 of it, plus I wouldn't be able to fly it without that front cable that held up the front jib. So I had one motor functioning and about 10 gallons of gas, and I was about 70 miles off the coast at that point. And I ended up motoring with the one motor, and my rudder system had failed or broke. The connecting point across the back of the hull had snapped. So I had one working rudder and one motor. So I had a working rudder on the port side and the starboard motor running, and what I did was I angled that motor in a little bit, towed it in, and then towed in the rudder, and that made the boat track better. And then I had about 20% of the mainsail up, and then I would move that sail around to help the boat, to steer the boat and keep it on course, because I did have some wind and it was a slight headwind. So because I was able to keep the boat on course pretty consistently, I was actually able to get some sleep and kept things going 24 hours a day. And that's what it took to get me into the inn, because I ended up, if I had stopped and slept, I would have drifted further out to sea just because of the wind, and could still be out there for all I know. Because I ended up coming in, I had 3 gallons of gas left when I showed up here, so I didn't have a lot of margin there for air. So it was a good thing I kept it going. So my family was here. To my surprise, I was expecting my brother. They had actually gotten here about a week earlier. They'd come down intentionally, thought they'd come down a few days before, but then as I got hung up out there for a few extra days, then they had to wait. So they were relieved and happy that I was home, and I had a great meal and a hot shower, and was physically and emotionally well. And my brother thought that I was doing really well, and I told him to wait 3 days, because by then, on the 3rd day, when you're out to sea like that, on the 3rd day when you come back in, you physically just fall apart. Everything, your adrenaline wears out, and the pain, all the pain sets in, and you don't realize what you've done until you've been on land for 3 days. It's been about 4 months now, and I've got a rotator cuff that's been bothering me since the 3rd day that I got here, and it's been extremely painful and very uncomfortable. And it does seem to be getting better, but boy, it's taken a long time to get better. This rotator cuff gave me 0 problems out at sea, and apparently I feel like I must have damaged it because I always sleep on my right side. So I must have just been grinding on that joint when I slept for so many hours a day or a night, whatever I was doing. But I ground that joint up, and it's giving me problems. So interesting trip. This leg I also did all solo, so it was again just problems and overcoming them, different problems. I probably the whole trip I bailed less than 100 gallons of water off the boat. The bottom of the boat was not completely finished. It was rough finished, so it's still through the joints and everything of the fiberglass. It was not sealed 100%, so it could get a little bit of water seep through the fiberglass. The fiberglass itself is not actually waterproof. You put the gel coat on it to do that, and gel coat was in limited supply, and I could deal with the bailing, so that had to been addressed once I got back to the States. I wouldn't trade this experience for anything that I've had in my life so far. It's just taught me a lot about myself, and it showed me the goodness in others. Just amazing experience that I don't know that I would suggest anybody else to try, but if you're up for it, do it. Hopefully you will have less problems. If you do, you just got to sit down and figure out ways to overcome them. You cannot think about every little thing that may happen, because basically the problems that I had on the way back were different than the problems I had going down. And it's just, if you try to sit around and plan everything out, you'll never leave. Sometimes you just got to pull up anchor and drift off and take off and see what happens and deal with it. I've heard of people sailing thousands of miles with no problems at all, and that's great. It's just one of those things. depending on the boat, situation. Solo sailing is very difficult. It's just a matter of how much you can tolerate. Lack of sleep, eating, drinking, all this you have to do. You have to maintain it. And if you get behind, it's hard to come back on it. I found that I drank about 2 liters a day, and I seem to be okay with that. I probably lost 20 pounds, and but I felt fine, and it wasn't because I wasn't eating a lot. I just needed to actually eat more. You're probably consuming 4,000 calories a day when you're moving 24 hours a day like you are out on the open sea. So it's hard to change your diet to increase that to 4,000 calories. But I looked good, felt good, was lean, and spirits were much better coming into Sarasota than they were to Santa Marta. I actually went through basically a little post-traumatic syndrome stuff down in Santa Marta for a couple months, and it was a mild case, I would assume, but I really didn't want to do nothing or have anything to do with the boat or the water for several months, and it was a lot to go through. So get out there, sail, be it a day trip, 3-hour tour, whatever. It's good stuff. You find out who you are and what you're made of. There are no problems. There are only solutions. And and if you're in a fight with whatever on the boat, you're going to get knocked down. And my opinion, you don't lose the fight if you just keep getting up. You got to keep getting up. Don't lose the fight. Keep getting up.